Hello and welcome back to the Taking the Land podcast. You are here on the very first Testimony Tuesday of 2025. We are entering season 8 of this podcast, and what an incredible journey it has been. We're grateful for the opportunity that to be in your ears. What a blessing it is. And for those of you who are premium subscribers, once again, we can't wait to provide you a whole year's worth of content, sermons and interviews and unsung heroes and all that we are planning to do for the kingdom of God and for world evangelism. So thank you so much once again for the journey. We're looking forward to another season. And as we are recording this, it's a cold January morning here in Virginia Beach, but you're probably going to be hearing this in February. So a few weeks out, I'm pre-recording some of these interviews so that we can have them stacked up and ready for release. And so it's been a great holiday season for myself and our family, our church here in Virginia Beach. We thank you for all of you who have been patient. We take this January break every year to kind of recharge our batteries, and then we get back to business in February. So, but by the time you're hearing this, you're going to be hearing daily podcasts once again. So from Virginia Beach, we want to thank you for the opportunity. So today, I want to welcome into the podcast Pastor Jerry Sarabia. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. Pastor Jerry,
Yeah, absolutely.
welcome to the show.
Yes, sir. Thank you, bro. Welcome. Glad to have the opportunity to be here with you.
Yes, it's a blessing. We appreciate the time that you set aside for us. I've known you just a little bit through your posts on WhatsApp and the pictures that you've been posting there. I know that you are out of the El Paso church, but for me and for anyone else that may not know you, why don't you give yourself a quick 3 to 5 minute conference style introduction and let us know where you're serving God, and then we'll jump into your backstory.
Okay, wonderful. Well, my name is Jerry Sarabia, and like you said, me and my wife, Jenny, we call her Jenny, are out of the El Paso church, Pastor Paul Stevens. We have been pastoring for roughly the last 20 years, and we have found ourselves in the great nation of Albania, Tirana, Albania, and we arrived approximately about 9 weeks ago. And it's just been an incredible time. Albania is just a place that I believe is just ripe and ready for the gospel. We have been praying for a number of years. You know, we've been pulling on our pastor's coattail and saying, hey, you know, Albania. And we are finally here. And I don't think the timing could be any better. Just we've been able to see wonderful things taking place. We've prayed with numbers of people. We've actually had the opportunity to have some Bible studies in different places. We're going to have some prayer meetings this coming weekend, and our first kind of official church service / Bible study. It's going to be like a testimony night this Sunday of myself. So it's kind of just something that we're going to dub it as, my testimony, why we're here, just to be able to present the gospel, share with people, a little bit of our vision and bring them to a place of decision. So we're excited. It's just me and my wife. We are now officially empty nesters. We came with my daughter, who just turned 19 and is engaged. So last week or 2 weeks ago, I flew her back to the States. She's preparing for her wedding in April. And
Wow.
I can't believe how quickly it happened, but we are here all alone. It's interesting because, you would think that there'd be this overwhelming missing family. And although I miss and I love my parents and our family members and my kids, I wouldn't trade anything for being right where we're at right now at this time. So we're excited and we're looking forward to all that God's going to do.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I'm excited for you guys. We have had Albania on our hearts. So as the audience knows, my wife and I, we were in Bulgaria as missionaries from 2010 until 2015. No, I've got those dates wrong. It's 2005 until 2010. And during that time, we were, it was made aware to us of the nation of Albania and its capital city, Tirana, and just doing some research. And I thought at the time, back then, it would be a great opportunity for somebody to go in. And so I'm glad that you're there, because I've told a few people that about that opportunity. And so I'm
Nice.
glad that our fellowship now has representation there. I think that it's a great opportunity.
Yeah. We're excited to be here, man. And it's been it's been a long time. I know I shared with you the story of where Albania was first placed on our hearts, and that happened actually 20 years ago when we pioneered our first church in Clearwater, Florida. And my first disciple, first kid I ever prayed with, first outreach, first person I witnessed to is Pastor Michael Major. Michael Major actually invited us over to some friends of his for Thanksgiving, and it's an Albanian family. And I don't know where Mike ended up that day, but he kind of disappeared and went off with our friend Ali. And we stayed there with their parents, and we were able to pray with his parents. We're able to pray for the mother who was injured, like a carpal tunnel type thing, and God healed her, and she was there in her living room praising God. And I kind of just went out on the limb and said, one day we're going to plant a church in Tirana or in Albania. Wow. And 20 years later, lo and behold, Thanksgiving morning, I got a text from Mike, and he said, man, it's crazy. 20 years ago, you prophesied and said one day we'll send a church to Albania, and here you are spending your first Thanksgiving in Albania. So we're pretty excited, man, that we're here. It's awesome.
Yeah. That sounds like God to me.
Yeah, I think so.
That's awesome. Okay, well, we don't call this Testimony Tuesday for no reason. We're going to jump into your testimony, Pastor Jerry, and if you could give us an idea of where and how you grew up. What was your family life like, and what was little Jerry like growing up?
Well, I don't know if I've ever been little, but I'll try and go back and share some of what God has done in my life. But I got saved November 15th of 1992. I was 20 years old. I remember the sermon that was preached when I walked into church. I was a drug addict. I was an alcoholic. I was a gang member, in and out of jail. I wasn't, the roughest, toughest guy in the world. There's, I'm sure, badder dudes than I was, but I was nonetheless just lost, no hope, just always causing problems and pain for my family. I grew up with my mom and my dad and my sister. And, it was just the way I lived my life. My sister probably, never even told anyone that I was her brother, just because I was on the opposite spectrum. She was a who's who athlete, who's who academics, just a great kid. And on the other hand, me, I was the one causing problems, and she just, couldn't relate to me at all. Didn't really even much like her brother or her father. My father was an alcoholic as well, just partying all the time. And I remember growing up, he was the kind of the guy that everyone wanted to be. He was not, he was just a cool alcoholic. He was a cool partier, and in Little League, and everyone, liked my dad. But, as we kind of started getting into junior high and high school, all of that started unraveling. My family started falling apart pretty quickly. My mom and dad were constantly fighting. My dad would go, he'd disappear for days at a time because he's getting high and using drugs. And what casually started out, my father being an alcoholic, eventually turned into drugs, eventually turned into being addicted to, coke and all sorts of craziness. And at the same time, here's his son following in his footsteps. So it was kind of rough for my mom. My mom was never a drinker, a smoker, just a good woman. She would pray every night for us. And I remember when I got saved, there was a friend of mine who had invited me out to church. And this friend, maybe a year before that, he was running from the police in my neighborhood. He had actually, some cops pulled him over. And this guy, put his hands up in the air, says, "I give up." And as the cop's getting out, he kicked the door, broke the cop's leg. He went running, and he jumped into my backyard and knocked on my back door. And I let him in. And for days, the cops were just all throughout that area, just night and day looking for this guy. He lived a couple of blocks away. And I remember he stayed in my house for about, 3-4 days before he made a run for it to California. And
Wow.
And I remember telling him, I said, "Eddie, I don't know what you're going to do. I don't have the answers for you." And I remember giving him my Catholic Bible. And I says, "But I do know that the answers are in here. And
Wow.
you need it." Because, and it was crazy because he left. He went to California, and he got busted. They extradited him, brought him back home. And when he got home, he got saved. He got saved in our church. And right away, he called me and told me, "Hey, bro, why don't you come to church with me?" And it was very interesting at the time. I had right out of high school, ran off to California to Lake Tahoe to work in the casinos. I had dropped out of high school because the problems with gangs begin to be very difficult. Different gangs from different schools, different sides of town would be waiting for me after school. And I'm like, man, Dad, I got to get out of this atmosphere. So I had dropped out, and my dad said, listen, you're not just going to drop out and do nothing. You're going to drop out, get your GED, and get enrolled in college. And I remember literally I dropped out, went like on a Wednesday, went and took my GED on a Thursday, registered on a Friday. And it was crazy because the semester was starting and I was in school within a week. So I'm there at the community college, and it was just insane. And the problem is that nothing changed. Now I was just partying with older people. And I remember thinking, man, this is getting old, and I need a change. And there was some people that were recruiting to go work in the casinos there at the college. And I convinced a couple of buddies of mine, let's go to Lake Tahoe. And we made this big deal out of it. My buddy's dad bought him a little car, and we put, through a big party, Lake Tahoe or bust. And we took off to Lake Tahoe. And I remember 2 weeks of being there in Lake Tahoe. My friend's family came to visit him. I thought, man, that was quick. And what happened is they called their parents and says, man, we want to come home. And I was trying to convince them, bro, we did all that. There's no way I'm going home with my tail between my legs like that, quitting. And so my friends took off, and I ended up staying there alone. And I remember that again, I'm running from the problems of life, but everywhere I went, I was there. I could never get away from it. And then being there in Lake Tahoe, it was the wrong guy in the wrong city because the city never closed. It's a gambling town. So I ended up just, partying and losing job after job until I actually ended up homeless. And I remember, not for a long period of time, but I was with a roommate, and he had actually kicked me out of the house, changed the locks. He was on the lease, left all my stuff in a box in the front of the house. And for 2 nights I was sleeping on the beach. And I found some guy and ended up moving with him because he was going to college in Santa Rosa. So, all of this happened, and I eventually made my way back home to El Paso, and I'm 20 years old and I'm burnt out. I'm tired. And I remember I moved back in with my parents, and I had very, very few hours of college under my belt. And my dad was able to get me a job as a substitute teacher in a small high school district outside of the city. So I remember going out there, and I started at the elementary level. I'm there, and then they moved me to the junior high level, and then they moved me to the high school level. And what was happening at the high school level was, here I am, I'm 20 years old. I'm an active gang member. I'm a partier, but in the same breath, all through high school and college, I was never that guy that was dressed with, my pants sagging. So I could put on a front, I could put on a show, and I could, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no, sir, no, ma'am. I could pick your son or your daughter up and make you feel comfortable. I'd have them home by curfew, and I'd have them home by curfew. But man, the 4 hours I spent with them, man, I would ruin them. There were kids that I jumped in to our gang that ended up in prison. There's young women that I was everybody's good time Charlie, their first time high. And I remember getting girls high for the first time, and it all came full circle when I got saved. People telling me later when I witnessed to them, in tears, some of them, man, I'm so happy because I hated you. And I would be, what do you mean? And one of the girls told me, she says, Jerry, Lucy, which was her sister's half sister, she says, Lucy never did anything. And when she moved from my mom's house with us to our high school, she started hanging around with you, and she started using drugs with you. And then she got around all of my friends. And she says, we don't even know where Lucy's at now. Last we heard of Lucy, she's prostituting herself for drugs, and just story after story like that of people just hating me because I influenced their lives in a way where man, just horrible things happened. I remember jumping in a young kid, and he went all out for the set, and he eventually he had shot at some guys at a tire in a car that was driving by, and it ricocheted and it hit a kid in the car and it blinded him. That kid ended up going to prison. The family put up their house for the bond, and he still ended up going to prison because he was guilty, and financial problems came into the house. Arguments started happening. The family, his parents got a divorce. So the oldest brother blamed me for that. He says, man, if Bruce would have never met Jerry. So, this is 15 years later, him telling me this. I'm witnessing to him and him telling me, bro, I hate you. And I would be like, man, what the heck? I messed a lot of people up,
Wow.
There was another kid in my school who, again, because we were able to be yes, sir, yes, ma'am, there was a teacher that asked my close friend, will you kind of take my son under your wing? Her name was Mrs. Lafarelle. And he said, absolutely, Miss Lafarelle. Oh, and she goes, I just don't want him getting involved with the wrong crowd, whatever. So Kyle shows up and he says, hey, bro, we're going to watch this kid. I'm like, okay, man, bring him with us. And we go to one of our little parties and we would have parties where you couldn't come in unless I administered the acid to you. And this kid started frying on acid and using different drugs. And again, because he's around us, he gets around my friends that are gang members. And he asked one of them for a gun, and the guy lent it to him. And that evening he went home and he killed his father. So,
Oh my God.
The next day, they make this announcement and we're like, what? And everywhere we're going, this is the story, just ruining people's lives. Right. And so when my friend had told me, hey, let's go to church, there was a girl, again, I'm 20 years old. I'm in a high school. So I'm dating a student in the high school, a teacher in the high school setting me up with another student, which is her daughter that's in the high school. I'm messing around with a teacher in the high school. There's girls that would come by my classroom to hit on me during breaks. And I mean, it's insanity. I would bust kids with bags of dope and I would pinch the bag and give them the bag back. And they'd be like, man, and I tell them, don't bring your dope to school then. And I just kind of was no nonsense. I wouldn't put up with kids. So what happened is word got around the school and teachers started sending their kids to my classroom when they couldn't handle them. Because when they'd get to my class, I remember one kid said, what makes you think, because you're a teacher, I won't take my pencil out and stab you? And man, I remember standing up and I said, bro, what makes you think because I'm a teacher, I won't take that pencil from you and stab you? And people would be like, what the heck? Who is this guy? So they wouldn't mess with me and they'd listen, So I remember word got around. I'm this filthy, rotten sinner. And word got around and the principal comes to me and says, why are they sending all the students to you that have problems? And I told the guy, says, listen, Mr. Sepulveda, you have a discipline problem in your school. No one will discipline the kids. I says, I think you need, and I don't know if you ever heard of SAC, but it's a in-school suspension program where they put you in the little cubicles and stuff.
Right.
So I told him, I have experience with that. I think we should implement that here. He didn't know it's because I spent half of my high school in SAC, but
effective program.
Yeah. So I did some research. I brought a package to them and they hired me. They put me on contract. They gave me, and I was a SAC teacher. They brought in a portable. So again, here I am, and I'm literally in a portable in the back of the school all by myself. I'm smoking in the classroom. I'm hitting up girls. I mean, it's a mess. And there's one of the girls that I'm messing around with is having some problems, and her mom is going to send her to some like Job Corps. And I started thinking, man, I don't want her to go there because those places are messed up. She's only going to get worse. And I thought, man, should I move out and move her in with me? And it was a real weighty decision because I didn't want to mess my life up either. So I remember seeing an older lady at the school, and I thought, man, that lady's lived some life. I'm going to ask her for advice. So I went up to her and told her my situation, my dilemma. And she told me, mijo, solo Dios. She says, only God knows the answers that you need. And I says, man, you know what? She's right. So I got up that morning. I was going to Catholic church. I was going to go ask God, I need to know what to do. And that's the morning my friend called me, November 15th of 1992. And I walked into church and I remember the sermon because it was the first sermon after Bill Clinton had won for the first term. And Pastor Lamb preached a sermon that said, usually the people reflect the leadership. He says, but I believe for the first time in history, the leader is a reflection of the people. that we have voted a man into the office that is a reflection of who we are, unfaithful. And I remember thinking, my God, I voted him in because I thought with guys like that around, one day marijuana will be legal. So those were the depths of my thoughts at 20 years old. I voted for a president so that weed would be legal. And I walked into that church, and here's the pastor preaching about that. And he's talking about wanting to be different. He's talking about you wanted to change, you just don't know how. And I remember I would even give up weed for Lent with friends. And I'd say, bro, the Bible says if we say we're going to do it, we have to do it. Within a day, we'd avoid each other because we're smoking weed again. And I just wanted to be different. I was tired of it. I didn't know how to be different. And I walked into that church November 15th of 1992. And it was, I remember bowing my head and Pastor Lamb saying, if anybody wants to be different, wants to be changed, wants to ask for forgiveness, just lift your hand. God sees that hand. It was that quick. There was no contemplating. There was no, and the only thing I wondered was, why isn't everyone else raising their hand? And, I didn't realize that everyone else was saved,
Right.
And I remember leaving that service and that the night before I'd given my entire check to my friend because there was some indica, some really good bud that came to town, and I wanted as much as I could buy. And I remember, I went over to that friend's house with Eddie Barba, the guy that had invited me to church. And there's 3 guys there. There's one guy that was like, he was the youngest brother of the head family of the gang that I was a part of. There was another guy there named Joel who was a backslider, and I didn't know, but looking back, I remember I would talk about God or say things, and he would always tell me, Jerry, you don't know what you're talking about. And it was always like he knew something, and I would tell him, well, tell me what? And he says, I can't. And he'd never tell me, right? So that guy was there. And then there was another guy there that I had met at work, and just like so many other people, all he wanted to do was be like me. He wanted to smoke weed like me. He'd never done those things. So they were in his apartment, in his little hydroponic closet, growing some weed. And I walked in, those 3 guys are there, and they hand me the pipe. And I says, no, man, I got saved. I don't need that anymore. And it was like a movie, man. That little kid that wanted to be like me reached out and grabbed his marijuana plant and broke it. The guy that was a backslider got up and walked out. And then the guy that was a part of that gang family looked at me. He said, can I have the drugs? Can I have the weed you bought? And I told him, bro, you could give it to me, but I'm going to flush it. And he says, no, I'll take it. The guy that wanted to be like me was just looking at me like broken. He didn't know what he was going to do now. And then the other guy walked back in the room and put his finger in my face and said, you're not going to stay safe. And I said, bro, what are you talking about? He says, you're going to stop fornicating? And I told him, bro, what the blank is fornicating? I didn't know what fornicating was. And he goes, you're going to stop sleeping with your girlfriend? I says, why would I do that? And he says, because the Bible says no fornicator can go to heaven. And I remember I put my head down for half a second. I says, well, then I won't fornicate. And I told him, there's nothing worth the forgiveness that I just received. There's nothing more. And he walked out again. And that's how my Christianity started. And it just never stopped. Everywhere I went, and for probably about 6 months, I still went to all the parties. I would show up with my big gulp, and I would go say hi to everybody. And about 5 minutes, I would go turn the radio off and I would start street preaching. And
wow.
People tell me, oh, I'm a Christian. I'm like, man, you're messed up. I was on my way to hell. You never once told me. I mean, I was radical, bro. I was telling everybody anything. And all of my friends, one-on-one by themselves, would pray with me. They talked to me, but they never locked in, or they never, so eventually I would pull up to a parking lot where they're at and they'd just peel out. Everyone would run from me, man. No one would tell me where the parties were no more. The only party I knew every year where I was going to be at was the New Year's Eve party at a friend's house. So every year for probably about 5 years till that friend passed away, I would still go to those parties and walk in, spend about 10 minutes, and I'd preach,
Wow.
I remember even one year, I took my wife and my wife's sister. I says, hey, we're at the church and this is Pastor Stephen's daughters. And I told them, let me show you what I do for New Year's. We left the banquet at church. I took them there. And that year I started street preaching, and one of my friends started slapping me, man, just all out slapping me, telling me to shut up. And another friend stopped them and told them, listen, I'm going to knock your teeth out if you don't stop that. But that's how it was when I got saved. It was so amazing to me that I was forgiven, that I could be different, that I didn't have to live like that no more. And it's never been the same.
Man, what a story.
And then they fired me from the school.
Well, yeah, I'm sure they had a few things to fire you for.
No. So then what happened is I had revival in the high school. Then I started praying with kids, bro. I'm reading my Bible. I'm preaching. Kids
so they
are getting
fire you
saved.
for hitting up students, but only when you got saved.
Yes.
Okay.
When I got saved. So then they're coming. They're praying in my classroom. We're burning Ouija boards in my classroom. People are getting radically converted. I'm taking carloads of people to church from the school. Then the principal calls me into the office. Hey, I'm hearing reports. And then they say, we're not going to be able to renew your contract. And I'm like, man, I was in here.
It's wild.
A menace to society. And you guys promoted me, lifted me up. And then when I was actually doing some good, they fired me and didn't renew my contract. Go figure.
Unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
crazy.
I got a couple of questions for you. So going back to kind of your history, you said that your mom was pretty faithful to say prayers over you when you were a kid. And at least that when you were looking for answers, you at least knew where to start, which was with the Bible, and you had some inclination to go to a church service. I guess, did you see, like, where did that introduction to Christ and his, where did that spiritual background begin? Do you have any other like memories of God intervening in your life before you got saved?
Absolutely. So, we always went to Catholic church. We'd go Sunday mornings. We'd even have the priest over for dinner and beers and different things like that. He'd drink it up with my dad.
Priest over for beers. That's hilarious.
Yeah. And so I remember there was a time that my father, he was kind of looking for answers, and he took me to go see Mike Warnke, the Christian comedian guy.
Okay.
And I was a young kid. I was in elementary school. And I remember hearing his testimony, and man, it broke me. Like, I remember sobbing.
Wow.
And I bought the tape, and I would go home from elementary school, and I'd go home every day and listen to the tape.
Wow.
And I'd listen to it, and I'd weep, and I'd pray, and I wore the tape out where it wouldn't play no more. And then that was it. I didn't know what else to do. And I remember, and people would laugh at me, but we would be partying, and I would pass by a church, and I would pass the joint, and I'd do the sign of the cross. I mean, he had put seeds in me. And I remember my dad had come home, and my mom had said, we're Catholics. I don't think we should be. And my dad kind of we never pursued that, So there was a moment where God was trying to grab hold of our family. I was young, and it would have saved a lot of pain for my mom, because she went through hell. But, I'm glad also because we got saved in where I got saved at. And today my whole family's saved. My father, my mother, my sister.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a wonderful, wonderful thing, And it was my dad for years, just kind of just struggled, backslid, was still addicted to drugs in his 60s, running from police that probably weren't even there. But, praying for him, being there for him, loving him. I remember one time I walked in and he had just shot up and he wanted to just leave out of shame. But I was like, man, Dad, you don't need to go nowhere, and something worse happens and then you die. And then, so I just sat there with him, just talked with him, cried with him, and eventually, full circle, he's saved today.
Amazing.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, this is why I tell people that, like, Catholics, when you grow up, at least having that respect, for the things of God. And if you go to Catholic church, one thing you do get out of it is you kind of get a sense of awe or even fear. It's kind of a scary environment for people that don't know what it's all about. But that's what comes with it, is that sense of awe and respect for who God is. And so I tell people, man, don't be afraid to witness to Catholic people, because they are ripe.
Yeah.
So many of them are ripe for revival. And like you growing up in that context, those seeds are planted. I guess, why don't you speak to that person who maybe is struggling with a family that has Catholicism, or maybe they're discouraged about that, and encourage them to continue to reach out to those family members.
Yeah, when I think of that, and I'm just so grateful. One of the things that I've always spoken to my family, my kids, is that who are we? That God considered us, that brought us this far. And even today, my dad is suffering from Parkinson's. He was always an athlete. He can barely walk, and I still tell him that, man, I'd rather this the way we are. And he's like, man, you're right. And remind him, who are we, that God has considered us and brought us this far, and it's like the woman with the issue of blood. We can come to a place where the world hurts us so much. And when we're down, it adds insult to injury. And the Bible says that she only grew worse, so I get that you can get saved, and that you can cry out to God, and that you could believe God for your family in it. And sometimes it just gets worse.
Right.
And I remember, the Bible says that the woman with the issue of blood was bankrupt, that she had spent all that she had. And it's not just talking about her money. It was talking about her every ounce of everything she was. And I've been there for my father, where I remember I didn't even know what to pray anymore. And I couldn't pray anymore. And I remember I one night cried so hard that my eyes swelled shut. And I told God that you got to do you got to do it. And I quit.
Yeah.
I said, God, I'm giving them to you. And then my dad got cancer, and then my dad problems, but it brought him to the cross,
Wow.
So, there comes a time, number one is I would tell the person, never give up on your family.
Oh, yeah.
Someone that you love. Don't write them off. Don't get super spiritual and say, oh no, I can't have a relationship with, I sat with my dad in the hardest times of his life, and that meant something to him, The other day, I was at the Romanian conference, and I'd called my parents during the break. And I remember my dad called me, and I thought, oh man, something's wrong, and I answered the phone, and my dad said, wait, hold on, son, hold on. And I'm like, shoot, something's wrong. And he just wanted to put me on speaker so my mom could hear. And he says, I just got your international driver's license in the mail. It's because I had filed for it online so I could rent a car. And he says, I told your mom that he probably needs it, that we need to go mail it right now. And I laughed, and I told him, nah, Dad, I'm good. And I texted him, and I says, man, that I got the best dad in the world, that you would stop whatever you're doing because you think I need something, And he told me that, it's because I have the best son in the world. And that means, you know what I mean? And for people that are struggling, man, you have no idea how much we struggled. The Thanksgiving before I got saved, I remember we were at the Thanksgiving table, and my dad took the whole table and he threw it at me. And just an excuse to go out and party, just because he didn't want to be there, And if God could turn something like that around for me, there's hope for anybody, any situation, man. You just can't give up on them, and you keep asking God for them. And when you can't anymore, you give it to God, and God knows. God will help you.
So it sounds like because of your dad's brokenness, and it sounds to me like that was a source of strain for your relationship with him as you were growing up. Would you say that had any effect on how you approached God when you got saved? Because a lot of times what we do is, the way that our especially our father treats us. In my life, I can look back and say, because, my mom and my dad were divorced. My dad left the family and moved to another state. That was my assumption, that God was like that too, that he was just distant. And, we have that tendency to take the things that we've learned from our dad and put that on God. And I'm just curious if that had an effect on you.
It did affect me. And not in that way though. My dad, even in all that he did, he showed us some good things. Like, he was such a hospitable man to people. He would help people. He would always stop what he was doing for us. Even though, the things that he did, those things don't equivocate to love, right? But and I've even had people say that, well, he didn't love you. I beg to differ. I remember growing up, even just in school, and my dad and my mom were both school teachers. If they had an in-service or something, my dad would go out of his way to go buy me and my sister a burger and bring it to the school and walk into the cafeteria. Who's our hero too. Wow. Even though he's messed up. Right. So I loved my dad. I loved him.
Even in a sinful condition.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember from my earliest memories, I would sit in the back of the car and I'd pick up the empty beer can and I would try and sit like him. I'd try and put my arm like him, And the way it did affect me in my walk with God is that at every crucial time of ministry, every next step, the first time I got sent out, the first time you're given ministry, or the door director. I remember the devil would always speak that you're no better than your father.
Wow.
And that's the way he'd mess with me,
Yeah.
Yeah, it does affect you. Life beats you up, and and it's funny because so many good qualities that I've had and done. My dad says, "Man, where did you learn that, son?" And I laugh. It's like, "Dad, you like, he doesn't even remember the good things that, because he also deals with a lot of guilt now. You know what I mean?
Right.
But he's still, he's my friend, my old man, my hero, and even though he messed up a lot, what a gift. And my mom is amazing too. Yeah. Wonderful.
Is your sister still nearby?
She's in El Paso still.
Okay.
Her and her husband are just huge, integral part of the church. They're just a blessing to so many people. Great. Me and my sister have a relationship that's just incredible. You know what I mean? I love my sister. It's amazing. And God is the one who did that. Because even for a number of years after I got saved, I was still, I was still that guy to my family that wasn't going to come through, that was going to let you down, and that was going to, I was just that guy. I was always the dude making the mistakes. I remember there was a time where my dad, he was in rehab, and I remember the first night when the guy came to pick him up, my dad didn't show up. He went AWOL. And the guy convinced my mom to put all his clothes in a suitcase and put it on the porch. And I told that guy to get the heck out of my house. I ran him off, and I told my mom, I says, "Mom, we're the only thing that he has. Wow. And we're never going to, and she listened to me, and my dad came home the next day and took himself to rehab the next day, but had we listened to this guy that God only knows, right? So, I remember him going to rehab, and my mom just, God bless her. That night, a friend of mine, that same friend that the lady, Miss Lafarelle, took her son, that we would watch over him. Someone owed his dad some money, and they rented one of his places out in the boondocks, and they had a bar there. So we went to collect that money that night, and we broke the walls down of the bar and took all of their liquor. So here I am at 3 a.m. My dad's in rehab, and I've got a dolly taking cases of beer and liquor into the back shed of my house. And my mom and my sister looking at me through the window thinking, what an idiot, And my mom came outside and she slapped me and she told me, "How dare you?" And I was like, man. And I go, "Okay, guys, let's get this out of here." So we take the stuff and we leave, but my poor mom, she later says that when maybe a month before I got saved, she had made the resolution that there was no God. She said, I prayed my whole life. Nothing's ever changed. And she said, I was almost at the place where I stopped praying. And then you got saved. Yeah. So pretty
Cool moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So God was not just saving you, he was saving your family.
Oh my gosh, you have no idea. My sister hated my dad. She hated me. She hated men. Rightfully so, we're jerks, and then God has redeemed us just incredibly, I couldn't be more grateful.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. The other thing that I was picking up from your story is it sounds to me from what you're describing from your past is that you have a natural knack for influencing people. And before you were saved, you were influencing them for evil. And then after you get saved, God can use that and bring people to him. Would you say that that's accurate?
It's funny, even, and not just, the evil was like not purposeful even. I just thought I was having a good time with people. And then I grew to be worse and worse and worse. I remember one of the biggest struggles the first, year of my salvation was the peeling away of how evil I was. Hearing every sermon and thinking, God, there was a time in the beginning that I would get up out of church so mad and I'd go behind the church and I'd punch the walls, man. And then I'd come back inside to finish my medicine, because I was so angry at who I was and never realized, Now your ability to, it's funny because I remember, again, I didn't go around like throwing up my set. I didn't believe that, like, and I would always give these kids, because most of the kids in the gang didn't have a dad or I would always give them advice, and I would always tell them, bro, don't do that. You're going to end up in prison. And so eventually they gave me my gang name was Schoolboy, and they called me Schoolboy. It was all the Pee-wees kids that I jumped in. They said, the reason we call you that is because you give us good advice. Wow. And you're the only one of the older guys, you're the only one that's never served time, that's never got locked up or something. And we respect you for that. There's some, so it was crazy. There was always this, God purposed my life to help people, and there has been a real ability to be able to connect with people, especially people that are hurting. My kids say it. My oldest son says it very, he's the most pensive of all of them. And he says, it's a gift that the lowliest person in a room will never feel lowly as long as you're there. And I try to teach that to my kids, try to teach that to, that there are people that, man, they need you. They need you to recognize them. They need you to just speak a good word of encouragement to them. They need a hug. They just need someone to believe in them. And that's me.
Wow. It's a great gift to have. And it's something that I strive to be also, is to not leave people feeling like you've forgotten them, but to have the least of these in mind. And really that's a Christian ethic, right? The first shall be last and the last should be first. And so you have some natural knack for that. But I think that's something that all of us could strive for, especially in ministry, that it's not about us, right? Jesus saved us to be servants, so the servant of all. And that's really encouraging.
Yeah. And, we all, just reading this morning that, my Bible, and where David says that you've searched my heart, and you've my coming in and my going out, that was just this morning. And I was praying and say, man, before I was formed, and that includes the messed up stuff.
Oh yeah, of course, especially that stuff.
So it just makes you all the more grateful. Who am I? Who are we that you've considered us and brought us this far? I'm grateful, man.
That's amazing. Well, let's go back to when you got saved, because when you got saved in the El Paso church, when Pastor Lamb was there, man, you are the kind of convert that pastors pray for, that come in like a fireball and witness to everything that moves and bring carloads of people. And so I'm just curious, like, what was the atmosphere like? What was God doing in the church at that time?
It was supernatural revival. That year that I got saved, so many other key converts got saved. That group of people, there's a lot of us that are pastors. The church really exploded. The church in El Paso is always known revival. I mean, it's not, but there was a time where it was when I got saved, and there was just a number of other people that got saved, and it was supernatural. When I walked in the church, there was one domestic flag, two maybe at tops. Internationally there was two, and now there's 30 something international flags. And when they told us we could touch the world, we believed it, and our litter and our generation and all this wonderful people from El Paso, we've touched the world, and we're still on that trajectory. We're still taking nations and believing God. And there's a bunch of great younger disciples and pastors that are, missionaries right now, young kids in their 20s. And it's exciting, God's not done with El Paso,
Amen.
Yeah, it's super exciting.
What were your impressions of Pastor Lamb when you got saved, and what did you pick up from him in those early years of salvation?
When I got saved, Pastor Lamb, he right away took me under his wing. And I remember there was a real openness that I would, one of the things that would happen was he and other people would say different things where they kind of alluded that I was going to be a good pastor, preacher. I would kind of say things like, if that's what you're going to do, you do it. Don't choose for me. Don't put shoes on that fit you. And, this is not Cinderella. We're not trying shoes on. And it would bother me at first. And not bad bother me, but I'd just be like, pump your brakes. Let me decide. God, I don't feel God calling me to that,
Right.
But I loved everything about it. I remember real early on, I wanted to I didn't miss a service. I didn't miss a concert. I wanted to be in everything. For the first time in my life, people were treating me like with this dignity, and they wanted to be around me, and they wanted to take me out to eat. And man, that was unheard of in my life. And I remember, I really loved Pastor Lamb and his wife Gail and their kids. I had a great relationship with their kids. I remember one time Nick asked Pastor Lamb, Pastor Lamb, is God as big as Jerry? And Pastor Lamb told him, yeah, he's a little bigger, but, just had a great relationship with him and Kelly and all of their family. And I remember that I would go walking, and I'd just walk to their house, knock on the door, and come in, sit at the table with them. And, it was just, he was not the Wizard of Oz, he was very approachable to me. I remember, probably 2 months after I got saved, my parents moved to San Antonio. And my dad says, you know what, son, you should come. You could start college, get you a little truck. And I thought, man, this is a great opportunity to start over. I just got saved. And I went and told Pastor Lamb, and he says, son, you didn't get saved in San Antonio. You got saved here for a reason. He says, and all the people that you're influencing, and it didn't take convincing, it was simply, he told me, and I says, you're right. It's absolutely,
Wow.
I'm staying, and it was just,
Man,
was
what kind of
supernatural.
destiny is wrapped up in that decision, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
Could have been
Yeah.
very, very different.
Yeah, absolutely. Could have been. God only knows what could have happened, Yeah. And my parents ended up going to Pastor Richard Ruby's church. I mean, it was a good church, also experiencing great revival, but God wanted me to stay there. And I'm glad I did. Yeah.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
So your new convert experience, you immediately saw God changing your life. What kind of impact did that have on the rest of your life as you started learning how to serve Jesus? Like, you knew immediately that your life had been changed, but and you started witnessing to people. But I'm just curious, what did you find a struggle? What did you find difficult in those first few years?
I didn't know everything. I remember one time a kid told me, bro, you should stop cussing. I said, what do you mean? He says, bro, you cuss all the time. I said, well, at least I don't cuss in church. And he's like, bro, you just dropped the F-bomb, and we're in church. And I'm like, oh, shoot. Okay. And then, And I remember people being gracious with me and not being afraid to tell me stuff, and they tell me, and then okay, God, I got to deal with that. I got to, you know, so just that people were gracious with me, I remember one guy telling me, he says, bro, when you first were in church, he says, for years, because I used to fry on acid a lot, and I mean, like a lot. And they would tell me, bro, you would check out of conversations, bro. And I would be like, no, I wouldn't. They're like, bro, yes, you would. Yeah, but I don't know if I believe him, but I guess I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But, so, just people being gracious with me and and then there was, of course, there's always stupid people say stupid things, but it didn't matter. You know what I mean? It just didn't matter. I knew I belonged there. I knew I fit. I remember our pastor of visitation, Ernie Lopez, he was working with the teenagers. And I remember I was kind of deciding, God, what do I need to do? Where do I fit? And I remember all the little kids after service run up to me and they jump all over me. And I thought, should I be in that thing they call children's church, or should I? And I asked God, you got to show me. And I'm not even kidding. That same service, the youth pastor came up to me and said, hey, will you come share your testimony in the youth group? And I'm like, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was just praying God would, and I went and I never left. I became a part of that ministry. And until I became the door director, I never followed up on an adult. I always worked with the youth, even to it was crazy, but such a big group of youth were always around me that I almost kind of got shunned. Like people didn't want to invite me to fellowships because they knew I was going to bring 15, 20 kids, or and I remember sometimes it hurt because I'd be like, hey, what are you doing? They're like, oh, nothing. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then we're going to his house. I'm like, he just told me they're not doing nothing. And I'm like, bro, what's up? He's like, bro, you bring like 20 people. And, but that was us. That was, what we did. And I remember when my boys were young, that there were so many young girls that were around my wife that they helped so much with my boys. They were only, a year and a month apart, but they were there and they feed my kids and they watch my kids. Yeah, I mean, it was they were just always around. That was really what we were all about, was just the youth,
Okay.
And I remember
we got
offended. Yeah. Go ahead.
I want to give a shout out to those long-term children's church workers and youth ministry workers in churches, because man, what an influence you can have on people when they're young and they're open like that. And I just, maybe an underappreciated part of our ministries, and one that doesn't get the kind of headlines and attention, but our churches, especially our leadership churches, I think, that invest in children's church and in youth groups, yes. Man, that is a powerful, powerful ministry. Maybe you want to encourage somebody who's hearing this to invest in that.
Absolutely. And I always think that that's so necessary when you're getting involved with the youth. What I always try to tell people or give the advice is being and working with the youth is the longest sales cycle in ministry. And what I mean by that, a sales cycle is like, let's say you're at Bed Bath & Beyond. Someone comes in and says, hey, where are your comforters? And, oh, they're over here. Look, this is the 100 count. This is the 5,000 count. How much do you want to spend? This one? Okay, here you go. Sold. Now, I remember I worked with a company where I did BPO, business process outsourcing, and the owner told me, Jerry, you may not close a deal for 2-3 years. And in my mind, I was like, what, are you kidding me? There's no way. I'm a closer, but I'd never experienced a sales cycle that long. Now, when you're working with people in a church, you can have a couple that was on the brink of divorce. They have kids. They hated each other. They get saved and they can have influence the next week. They have a car. They begin to tell their neighbors, their mom, their dad, they're bringing people to church. And instantly the people that you're working with can become fruitful. That's not the case with a teenager. You're working with a 12 or 13-year-old. They can do nothing for themselves. They're not going to go pick people up. They're not going to go. And then, they're the most ungrateful group set there is. So it's a long sales cycle.
Right.
And then the boys, they're
brain
more,
damaged.
bro, they're more chicks than the chicks. They're like, man,
Yeah.
you didn't say hi to me, and that, bro, calm down, So it's just a lot of work. And what I'd like to do and tell people is encourage them that, bro, it's the fruit that, you just you gotta be around. And you can't look at that ministry like, oh man, I'm gonna change the world in a year. But you're not even gonna scratch the surface in a year. You have to be willing to give some time of your life for those people, spend some time with them, because they're gonna cost everything.
Yeah, that's really true. And we've heard that testimony. For those who are long-term listeners, we've had pastors on this show who are benefactors of that kind of ministry. Pastor Heath Flitcroft comes to mind from Prescott. I mean, grew up in the church and, was living wild as a teenager and looked to be like someone that was not going to come around for a long time. Today serving as a missionary in the Caribbean islands. Yeah. So, you're right. And you have to have that 5 to 10 year vision of what can these seeds that I'm planting now, what could they become? And that not everybody has that automatically. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Garrett's just the beast at that, Pastor King, just the vision that oh my gosh, it's incredible. I love how he sees that. So many other people too, but again, there's a lot of people that get frustrated quickly and they simply give up. And I would tell someone that's listening, that's frustrated, don't quit, man, because it leaves a lingering stain upon the kid. So it's just another guy quit, gave up, didn't want to, it's they just need people to believe in them,
Wow.
And spend a little time believing them. I remember one Bible study, Pastor Ernie had said, it was testimony, everyone sharing testimonies. And I was literally looking at all of the kids and I was thinking, God, I would have never hung out with any of these kids. I have nothing in common with any of these kids. And I was just thinking, I was laughing to myself at the fact that I was even there with them. And I remember that each one of those kids, one by one, is sharing their testimony, and they're telling me how grateful, or telling the group how grateful they were for me. And I thought, man, that's incredible. I did nothing to deserve that, but listen to them, be there for them. We don't even relate to anything. Like half the stuff they talk about, I would think in probably the back of my mind, like, man, you're crazy. Like, what? How do you even like it? But if you just spend the time, just a little bit of time listening to them, man, it. And even now, I'm 52 years old, going on 53, and everywhere we go, I make it just a little effort to minister to a young man, a young woman, show them a little bit of interest. And bro, they write me from all over. Even this last year that I was an evangelist, spending those little moments with these kids that are 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and they text me randomly, man, we miss you guys. Man, we love you guys. Just because they need it. They really genuinely love people that just take a little bit of time for them,
Yeah. Time is currency, especially for young people. Yeah.
Yes.
So we are past the 1 hour mark, and so we're going to take a break here, and we're gonna say goodbye to our free listeners, and we're going to continue the conversation for our premium subscribers. We haven't even talked about your discipleship journey. We haven't talked about how God called you to pastoral ministry. We haven't talked about your wife, Jennifer, and how you guys came together. So we're going to save all of those conversations for after the break. If you're one of our free subscribers, thank you for listening. We appreciate you. We would ask you to consider becoming a subscriber. All of our proceeds go to world evangelism, so you can feel good to know that you are helping with a missionary journey for somebody as you purchase this premium subscription. You'll also get the daily sermons every day. It's a new fellowship sermon in your podcast feed. So if you want to hear the rest of this conversation with Pastor Sarabia, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.